Hi, and welcome to the Low Level Devil channel. In this video I'm going to show you how to create a packaging system for your Linux build. When I run Linux, I typically prefer to install everything from scratch. There's a great resource for this called Linux from Scratch, aka LFS. I will put a link to it in the description. One thing that is not really well covered in Linux from Scratch is a method for packaging the software that you build, so you can create your own distribution. I've created a simple method for packaging and installing software on my own distribution, which I call PullLinux. It is a very simple set of shell scripts and a specific tar file format, which I'll walk you through in this video. I'm going to assume that you have some exposure to LFS and possibly have attempted it on your own, so I won't cover all the basics of building a complete Linux system from scratch. This will just be a tutorial on how to set up a packaging system so you can reuse your distribution on multiple computers or virtual machines. So I'm going to start off by showing you how I would package the sudo application. First I'll go over to the linuxfromscratch.org page for it, and this is the URL for downloading the source for sudo right here. Now when building a package, I use the variable p for my packaging directory, which you can see here, and the sources/bin directory for my completely built packages. These are all the tar.xz files that I've created before. So now if I do a find on $p, I can see it's currently empty. I always like to check that before I do a package build. Now I have a download script here that I use for downloading these packages. First I grab the file name from the input URL. I just use awk to pull that off the very end of the URL. So here it'll grab that whole sudo tar.tz. Then I grab what I assume to be the directory name it's going to create, and 90+% of the time it is that directory that ends with .tar, so it would be sudo 191 there. So then I echo out the file name and the directory. I call wget on the URL, then I tar that file name that it downloaded, and then I cd to the directory that it created. So this is just a easy script to make it so I don't have to keep typing all these commands. And I have an alias here, which I call dl, which just runs that dl.sh. And I'll go ahead and run it here. Let me copy the URL first. So now if I just type dl, paste in my URL, you can see it downloads it, and it extracted it and cd'd straight into the directory that it created based on that file name. And here's the source for it. It's just a quick utility I use to make it faster. So now I can just copy in my config. So can copy in my configure. And it will run the configuration before we do our make. Now we can just type make. Okay, and I'll speed it up a little here so you don't have to wait. Now make install is usually how you will install the software on your host system, but we don't want to install it on the host system here, we want to package it. So if I look again in my $p directory, now I can just type sudo make and destdir equals $p install. And when you use destdir on most make packages, it will go to the directory that you provided. And you can see here, if my source is bin temp, we have userbin sudo, userbin sudo edit, userlib sudo. So all the files you need to run the sudo package as they would be installed on your root are now installed in this temporary location. So if I go to there and I do ls, you'll see we have run user var etc, all the places it's normally going to install files when it goes to install it on your host system. Now there's also some configuration that we have to do for this specific package. So what I do in this case is I create a directory _install at the root of our package install directory. Now if I go in here, any files for installation I put in here, and there's a special file install.sh. If it finds it, it will run that during the install process. So in my install.sh, I'm just going to copy these commands in and customize if you need to. In my case, I like to use no password for my wheel users. And let's see, we'll create this pam sudo file and change the permissions on it. Now we just save this file. You don't need to make it executable or anything. It'll automatically be executed with bash during the install process. So now another thing that we have here, if we create a .dep file, this is where we add our dependencies. So for sudo, there's no solid dependencies, but there are some optionals. I always put Linux PAM on my base system, and I have Kerberos on it as well, so I might as well go ahead and create some dependencies for that. So let me find my PAM here. So we just need to copy just the name of the package, not this extension that I put on the end. I put the name of the distribution and the version tar.xz at the end. So I just want to copy Linux PAM 140. I'm going to put that in my .dep file. And I'll do the same thing with Kerberos. Let me see if I can find the tar name. I think it's KRB. Yeah, there it is, KRB5. So I just take that one, copy just the package name, put it in my DEP file. So now if we look in our folder at the root, we have all the files that it installs normally on Linux. Then we have our installer and our dependencies file. So now we're ready to actually just create our tar from that. We can use the tar command -c to create, J for the XZ format, and F. And I'm going to put it in the directory back1, which is my sources bin. That's where all my binaries go. So remember, here's the package name that I'm using, sudo-1.92, and then the extension. Oh, I also have to put dot at the end, so that'll create it with all the files in the current directory. Now let me just list the files in that back directory. And here you go, there's our tar file that was created. So that will be used by our installer. And I'll go over what this installer is now. Under sources, let's see, under the install folder, I have a set of directories that I use for installation. In scripts, there's a bunch of scripts. Here's the main install script, pck-inst. It's pretty long, but I'll go over it line by line. The first line, we grab the jar file that we're going to install. That's this right here. Now we grab the pck name of it, which is basically the whole file name, not including the directory. And then for the second parameter is going to be our destination, and we'll use just / by default if it's not set. Now for ending, that's the suffix that I put on the end of all these packages. And to extract the package name, I'm going to use base name on that file here, and then -s, the ending, to remove this ending. So it's going to just give me the package name. So sudo-1.92 will be in the pck name variable. Then I have a variable for the pck list, which is where I have all my installed packages, a list of all the ones that are installed. Let's see, this next line found, we can ignore that. I'm going to remove that. It's no longer used. So now I have a source dir where I use dir name on the script that's running. So it's basically going to give me the directory of the script that's currently running, and it's going to look for a checkinst.sh in that same folder. So that's going to tell me if this package name is installed in that package list. So if that returns 0, then I'm going to just echo out this is already installed and return -1. Otherwise, I'm going to just continue on and print this message installing the package to destination. Now I look to see if there's already a temp directory for the install. If there is, I just remove it. Now I create that temp directory and copy that full package into the temp directory. Now I use the tar program to extract the DEP file from that tar that's passed in. So I just grab the DEP file and it goes in my temp plx install package directory. So now I check to see, does that DEP file list? If so, then there's dependencies. So I print out that we have dependencies. So now I grab all the dependencies by catting that file and putting it in a deps variable. Then I remove the file because we're calling this recursively. So now for every file in that dependencies, again, we can ignore this found. I'll remove that before I check it in. So we call again this check inst on the dependency and see if that one's already installed. If it is, then it returns 0, already installed, and we'll continue on to the next one. So otherwise, it's going to run the $0, which is the current script, the install script. It's going to look in the same package as the source and find one with the name and ending of this dependency. I hope you're following along. It might be a little complex. Just post if you have questions in the comments, though. So if this succeeds, it says OK, otherwise it fails. And else, if there's no dependencies, it'll just say no dependencies. So now past the dependencies, we cd to the destination. We use tar hxf on the package that was passed in. So that allows tar to follow links and everything like that. So now it looks for that install directory we create. And it looks for pre-install. I separated both pre-install and install, but I don't really use pre-install. I don't know that it's going to be necessary. But then I just run, if that pre-install is successful, it'll say pre-installed, otherwise it'll say failed and cd back. And the same for the install. So if install succeeds, it says installed, otherwise it says failed and it'll exit 1. Now it's just going to remove that dep file if it exists, remove the install folder if it exists, and remove that plxinst folder. Then it's going to echo out that package name into the package list file and print out that it's complete. Now let me go over one more little script here, this checkinst script. This is how I check if something's installed. It's a lot smaller, so it's got the two parameters, the package and then the package list file. So if the package list file wasn't set, it'll by default use the normal location I use for it. Now it just loops through every name in that package list, which I'm just using the variable f. So if f is equal to the package name that passed in, then it did find it, so I say exit 0. So that means that it found it, and exit 1 otherwise. So that's a pretty simple set of install scripts. I'll go ahead and run an install here, and you can see also in my scripts directory I have several other scripts to do different things. I'm first going to copy my base dev packages to my base packages text file. This is just a text file that has the list of the base packages that I use before I can enter the chroot environment. And these are all just the tar files in that list. Then once I enter the very first change root environment, I have these that get called because they'll have installers as well that'll need to be run. And in my main install script, I have a create script. It calls prepare to create some mounts. Then it runs the base install to extract the packages to the plx inst location. Then a couple of change root scripts and a cleanup to clean up mounts. All these are on the GitHub page for this as well if you want to take a look at it in the description. So we have this chroot 1 and 2. All these call individual scripts that do certain things. For instance, chroot post install. I can take a look at that one here. Let me find it. Yeah, it's right here. So this one it creates a bunch of configuration files at the very end and runs some commands that it has to be running as root in that environment for, like creating the network, generating the SSH key. So now I'm going to go back one directory, and you can see I have this plx inst is the location where I actually will install it. This is mounted on a separate disk. So, hold on, wrong one. Yeah, we can see it's empty. So let me just clear. So if I just do find plx inst, that's the root directory for my mounted drive. So I just type sudo -e, and that's important because to pass your environment variables. So scripts/install. And I'm just going to speed this up. Now I'm just typing my passwords for my root user and my plx admin user. And it's finishing up here. Unmounts the drives that were used. Now if I cd into that plx directory again, I can see here's my full directory set for my Linux install. So now at this point we can just reboot the system and I'll boot onto this mounted drive. Just speed it up here, log in as root. The first thing I do is I just go in my scripts directory. I have a package that I need to install after it's running, which sets up some security certificates and all that, so I can use HTTPS. So I'll just run the bash post install. Now if I go to my packages directory, let me make a temp directory. Let's look at this KDE full install. So at this tar file, all that's in here is a DEP file. So nothing gets installed actually, but it has dependencies. It depends on KDE Plasma, Firefox, Arc, Udisks, a bunch of different packages that I want to install my base full KDE install. So I can just run my package install script that I showed you against that specific package, and now it's going to run through each of the dependencies, grab the dependencies before it installs, and it's basically going to run through lots of packages. I'll just speed this up here. It's going to take probably about maybe 10 minutes to install at the most. I'm eventually going to upload all these tar files to the GitHub page as well, so if you want to use them you can. So now that's just about finished. Alright, so now you can see it completed, the KDE full, so I'm just going to reboot again. Go to my min install. Let me resize it here. And you can see it booted up in the light DM. And I'm just going to log in as my PLX user. Resize this again. And the first thing, here you go, KDE environment running. First thing I like to do is just set up my display settings. I'm going to go to my display config and change my resolution to what I usually use. There you go, that looks a lot better. So here's a full running KDE system that I just did based on my simple install scripts that I showed you for packaging and installing. So you can see I'm going to run my console here. works perfectly fine. Let's see, I think I also have a browser. I think I included Firefox. Yeah, there it is. So it's got Firefox fully configured. I can look at the Linux from scratch web page here. So there you go. So if you're like me and you've run Linux from scratch several times, rebuilt for different systems and everything, this makes it a lot easier because you can package these builds after you do them and just reuse the binaries that you already built. It makes things much more convenient, and it's a nice way to create your own little distribution that others can use if you want, or you can move on to other machines. Um, if you have any questions about this, feel free to leave comments or message me. And hopefully you learned something from this video if you've made it this far through it. So like, comment, subscribe to this channel. I tend to go over things that are more on the development side, but I wanted to cover this as well because I use Linux from scratch every day on my own system. So again, thanks for watching.